All right, when you start actually getting ready to paper mache your big head, first off, it's going to be messy. So you'll want to make sure that you have newspapers laid out. I have like old shower curtains that I've saved over the years where they're sort of plastic. So like pieces of plastic or like a big, one of those big black garbage bags you can sort of cut open. That would work really well because you can reuse it because you're going to be getting things wet. So make sure that you have yourself a nice clean spot to do it. I'm in my garage here. I've got sort of my plastic down over this little table, and I have another table where I've got plastic down over it from where I set up when I paint so that those things don't get messed up. And I've got my paper here cut into little triangles. Okay, you're going to be using newspaper, but I had this left over from last year from a project we did in sculpture class, so I thought I'd use it. And it's pretty simple. On my big head here, I've attached some of my forms. So I've got like an ear form over here, and then I've got one of my nose forms over here. And make sure that your tape is sort of down and it's not sticking up. Mine was sticking up a little bit. I could put a little bit of tape here, but I don't think I really need to. So I've got my form mostly fleshed out. But when you start, so you'll take a piece. I'm going to kind of a medium piece, and I'm just going to sort of dunk it in the glue. Yes, your hands are going to get oogie. Okay, so kind of like scrape it off a little bit. If you drip it off in there, one, you save the glue, and two, you're not making messes everywhere. So then I just kind of put it over, and you really kind of have to kind of smear it in place. Okay? Kind of have to tap it down there. If you just take it and you just dunk it, you just go like this, and you just drag it over here, it's going to drip all over the place, one. But don't do this. Don't just sort of touch it one time, because what happens is you do that over and over and over again, and you have all these tiny little flags sticking up, and this is not going to be a smooth surface, because we're on a smooth surface. So really kind of put that down. But right now, we're just basically focusing on closing the gaps there, like I closed that one. Okay, and scraping it on the side works really well too. And look at that, that'll just go right over the top. Boom, never even knew it was there. Really getting it on there. And as you get set up, make sure that you have a spot where, if you're doing this in the middle of the dining room table or whatever, or a big table space in the kitchen or something, this is going to take time to dry. So you'll need a place to put your head when it is drying. You kind of only want to work in sections, kind of like a work on the top or maybe on the side, and it's got to stay in that same orientation. So if I was working over here on the ear area, I need to be able to make sure that it will sit in a place where it will dry in the right spot. Okay. So again, you just sort of dunk it in. And notice that my little container of paper strips is over there. I'm just taking one out at a time. You don't have to share now because you're sort of all on your own. And so I'm just going to kind of go around that corner there. Sort of tack that down a little bit. Okay. And, you just keep going and going. But the thing with the newspaper, your newspaper is going to be a little bit easier to use than this paper because this paper is thicker. Okay, but basically what you can do is you can get it nice and wet, you can kind of wring it out, and you can kind of squish it into like a form. And I can kind of come in where I've put that in that corner there, and I can start building up these areas. And sometimes I can come in with just a piece of paper that's all ready to go and kind of put it in dry, and it'll stick because it's got a lot left over. Okay? But right now at this point, you're basically just going around finding areas where it's taped, and you're going to paper mache over those taped areas. Okay, not worrying about most of the stuff, just worrying about kind of these big areas. Now again, what happens with, if you've got a really big piece, it can tend to like kind of buckle in there. And so the smaller pieces you have, the easier time you're going to have not getting this little buckling that's going on there. I can kind of zoom in where you can see the sort of wrinkles. I'm trying to not have that, but again, you can always put another layer of a dry one on top, especially when there is a lot of wet sort of underneath. Now, this can get wet. We've got cardboard, so it's gonna get the cardboard wet. But if you just keep working in one area over and over again, it's going to get really soggy. So move around, okay? But again, your newspaper will work a little bit better than this. And let me go grab, actually, I have a piece of newspaper that will work well. Okay, so I've got mine wet, and this is when you're actually building up those forms and making those curved features. So like if I wanted to have like kind of a rounded spot and have this ear kind of really come out more, I'm going to keep kind of making pieces. So I have this kind of really, this point to the ear maybe, or this little ridge. I'll tear a piece off the ear. Again, I'm kind of squishing it, really sort of getting that paper really wet. Where I'm really starting to be able to build up that form of that ear just with the paper. Now let me go grab some newspaper and I'll show you the difference between the newspaper. Alright, now if you take newspaper and you just have a big old chunk like this, that's not going to work. And of course this stuff tends to tear in lengths. You can look along the edge, if there's these little tiny ridges along the edge, that will tear that lengthwise very well versus tearing this way. This one worked out pretty well. Okay. Little rectangles like this work okay. I prefer the triangles, but that just takes a little bit longer. Okay, so this, you can get a little softer in here. So I'm going to sort of build that up a little bit more. Okay, so I've really got a really kind of interesting sort of lip on there of that ear. But again, when you start out, you're focusing on paper macheing your pieces of your features to the main piece first. Then you can go back and you can start fleshing out the big details, as well as covering up those holes.